With me now is Dave Jacobson, a Democratic strategist, and John Thomas, a Republican strategist. Both are also CNN political commentators. Good to see you both.
Great to be
here. All right, so Dave, you first. Where does Klobuchar, fit into this crowded Democratic field of presidential candidates just ahead of her making her formal announcement there for a very snowy Minneapolis?
Well, look, Fred, I think she's going to carve out the space as the pragmatist, as someone who can appeal to those sort of Midwest voters that we lost in the 2016 presidential election, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And I think those are three key battleground states that we're, of course, going to have to win this go-around. So I think, her sort of Midwest background is going to have wide-ranging appeal from a pragmatist perspective. She's going to try to brand herself as someone who's the consensus builder. And I think that's something that the Democratic Party needs. Right now we're a very sort of big tent party. And I think, part of the conversation needs to be where are we going to go as a party as we move forward towards 2020. And so I think you've got sort of the progressive wing, the Democratic Socialist wing, but this is more of the pragmatist, common sense wing. And I think it's definitely a healthy part of the conversation as we move forward.
Fred, I agree with a lot of what Dave said. I think the challenge, though, with that argument is the fire and intensity right now in the Democratic Party is not with the pragmatic, sensible, moderate approach. It is with the further left, the further progressives in the party. And you can see, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez takes new policy positions, many of the leading Democratic presidential contenders can't control their enthusiasm but to jump on that train. That's where the enthusiasm is. And Dave, in primaries, it's usually where the fire and intensity is where you need to be, because that's the biggest lane for these candidates.
So Dave, is that true? Is that where the enthusiasm is, or it's just that's what's getting some attention right now?
Look, I think John's absolutely right. The intensity and enthusiasm obviously swirling around the progressive left, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have more pragmatic conversations from candidates like Amy Klobuchar participating in the dialogue that we have with the upcoming 2020 election. I actually penned an op-ed for CNN.com talking about the critical importance of having a number of debates. Given the fact that we are such a wide-ranging tent of a Democratic Party, I think it's absolutely vital that the Democrats battle it out in terms of a battle of ideas. We need to have a conversation with ourselves and with the American people on where we want to take the country. I think it's great that there's so many candidates. And in fact, Fred, as of now, with Amy announcing today, there are more women than men who have actually declared their candidacy for president of the United States. I think it's something that we desperately need as a party. And I think that she's got a lot to contribute. But I think John is absolutely right. There is tremendous enthusiasm with the progressive wing on issues like climate change and Medicare for all, and those, of course, as well, need to be part of the dialogue.
So then, John, that Klobuchar, has, according to this 538 Congressional Voter Tracker, that she has voted with Trump's interest 31% of the time. That's one distinction between her and perhaps the other Democrats who have thrown their hats into the ring. But how is that either an asset or a liability for her?
Well, it's an asset for her, I think, in a general election if she is the nominee. It's certainly a liability, I think, in the primary, when I think the question, and I don't think any of us strategists know the definitive answer at this point, is the secret sauce to getting through a primary driven on an issue-based election, or is it about who can stop and who is best to defeat Donald Trump? Who will say no 100% of the time to Donald Trump? So, look, if compromise is what the Democrats are looking for, she's marketable here, but I actually think it's going to handicap her. She may, in fact, depending on who gets through this primary, may be just positioning for vice president, because I don't know if her brand of politics makes sense in a primary.
And so, Dave, now that you have more candidates in the race, it seems the gloves might be coming off a little early in terms of really focusing on the target, which would be, on President Trump. Do you see that there is going to be less of Democrats turning to each other, and trying to knock off, the popularity of the contenders by criticizing each other, and more so on focusing on President Trump?
I think it's a balancing act, Fred. I mean, I think Democrats are going to run two parallel tracks. We're going to run a scorched earth campaign to justify why we need change against Donald Trump. But simultaneous to that, every candidate that's running is running to win. And so actually Axios this morning put out a story talking about the opposition research that has been shuffled by campaigns to reporters. And that's why you've sort of got these stories coming out in recent days. Just on Friday night, of course, there was a story about Amy Klobuchar and her relationship with her staffers and sort of the toxic sort of dynamic with some perhaps disgruntled employees from her office. Similarly, Elizabeth Warren, who announced just yesterday.
Could that potentially impair her?
Look, I mean, we'll see. It's obviously very early on, but definitely I think that the gloves are coming off. And I think between that and obviously Elizabeth Warren just yesterday, the issue, of course, with her past history claiming that she's a part Native American, you've got that dynamic with that baggage versus Kamala Harris and Cory Booker.
She didn't make any reference to that during her announcement, however.
Oh, of course she
Touch
wouldn't,
that.
right? I mean, no. She's got to move forward ahead and try to define herself with her own message. But
what is
go ahead.
interesting, Fred, though, about the Elizabeth Warren announcement is as much as the Native American issue continues to plague her and her campaign, in a way, she has an asset that every other Democratic presidential contender is craving right now, and that means she's in a fight with Donald Trump on Twitter, and that is an insanely valuable asset to have as we enter this primary
And she
season.
said she's ready to fight. I mean, she says she is a fighter, and she knows it's going to be a hard-fought race, and she says she is fighting to the end. So she made that pledge and appeal, and it looked like she really meant it.
And it's not, and a lot of these primary challenges, these candidates face real tests. Now, I don't know if the Pocahontas charge is going to be her fatal moment, but remember, Barack Obama had to give an address to save his campaign career in a Democratic primary when lots of people counted him out. So it's about how you handle these scandals and what timing
You're talking about the
these
Reverend
scandals
Wright
hit.
moment?
Yes,
Okay.
when these scandals hit and how you handle them.
All right, Dave Jacobson, John Thomas, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much. And of course,
Thanks,
we're all
Fred.
standing by still to hear from U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar.